They say living alone brings peace, and at first that's exactly how it feels. You wake up to stillness, no rush, no interruptions, no one asking questions, no one needing anything, just silence. It feels like freedom, a soft kind of quiet that settles over the house like a warm blanket. You drink your coffee when you want, you move through your day at your own pace, and that's beautiful. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes silence isn't peaceful. Sometimes it's loud, not in sound, but in memory. Because this silence isn't always restful. It doesn't just let you nap undisturbed or enjoy the calm. It starts to echo with voices you haven't heard in a while, with laughter that once filled the walls, with the footsteps that used to come running down the hallway. Suddenly, the quiet doesn't just mean no one's around, it starts to remind you of who used to be. Maybe it's the sound of a jacket in the closet that hasn't moved, but your mind remembers the one who wore it. Or a chair at the dinner table that stays empty night after night. These moments, these absences, they visit without warning. They creep in when you least expect it, while folding laundry, flipping channels, or walking down the same hallway you've walked 1,000 times. And that's the part no one prepares you for. We don't often talk about the kind of quiet that carries weight, the kind that holds stories, memories, and sometimes even grief. We celebrate independence, and rightfully so. But we don't always recognize how that independence can quietly start to feel like isolation. So let me ask you, have you ever sat in a silent room that suddenly felt full of voices from the past? Have you ever felt more surrounded in your solitude than you did in a crowd? If you have, you're not alone. You're human. You're remembering. You're grieving. And that means your heart is still tender, still capable of love, still alive. And in that kind of silence, where the world fades and memories rise, something sacred begins. Because sometimes when everything else gets quiet, that's when God starts to speak. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it fills your heart. It doesn't just mean there's no sound, it means something or someone is missing. When you live alone, silence takes on a different weight. It's not always peaceful. Sometimes it's haunting. You walk past a photo frame, and for a second it feels like the person in it is looking back at you. You glance at the empty chair across the room, the one that used to hold someone you loved. You open the closet and hear the soft swish of a jacket, even though no one's wearing it anymore. It's not the fabric moving, it's the memory that lingers, and it hits you, not with a shout, but with a whisper, a familiar voice, a laugh you can still hear in your mind, a scent that seems to come from nowhere. These moments visit you without warning. Sometimes they feel like old friends, bringing comfort and warmth. Other times they feel like ghosts, reminding you of what once was and what's no longer there. That's something people don't really talk about when they say living alone. They think it's about managing meals, locking the door at night, or keeping the TV on for background noise. But it's deeper than that. It's about walking through a home that remembers, a home that speaks even when no one else does. Have you ever had that experience? Where the quiet suddenly becomes a story, where a still room feels alive with memories. That's the sacred part of silence. It holds the echoes of love, the footprints of the past, the conversations that once filled the air. And while it may hurt sometimes, it's also proof. Proof that something real, something beautiful, once lived here. And maybe, just maybe, it still does, through you. So don't be afraid of the quiet. Listen to what it's trying to say, because sometimes in that stillness, you'll hear more than you ever could in a crowd. They say silence is empty, but I want to tell you something. They're wrong, because even in the quietest corners of your home, God is there. He's not only found in the loud worship songs or the bustling Sunday services. He's not limited to the places filled with noise and praise and crowds of people. No, he's also in the stillness, in the creak of the old floorboards, in the sighs you let out when you think no one's listening, in the slow rhythm of your breath as you sit alone in the early hours of the morning. Maybe you've had days where you felt invisible, where the phone didn't ring, where no one knocked on the door, where your name wasn't spoken out loud even once. But just because people don't see you, doesn't mean you're not seen. Just because they don't hear you, doesn't mean you're not heard. God sees it all. Every quiet victory, every silent struggle, every step you take forward, even when it would be easier to give up. And he honors that.
There's something sacred about the kind of strength no one else claps for, the kind that shows up anyway. The strength it takes to get out of bed, make your own coffee, say your own prayer, and whisper, "Lord, I'm still here." You may feel alone, but you're not abandoned. You may feel unseen, but you are deeply known. God is not distant. He leans in. He draws near to the brokenhearted. He is closer than you think, closer than your next thought, your next breath. And when you sit in the silence, you may just hear his voice the clearest. So if today feels long, if the quiet feels heavy, if the house feels too still, remember this, that stillness might just be holy ground. Because where you are, God is. And he's not just passing by, he's staying. People often talk about independence like it's the ultimate goal. And yes, in many ways, it is a blessing. There's a deep kind of dignity in being able to take care of yourself, to live on your own terms, set your own schedule, and make your own decisions. But there's a side of independence that no one really talks about. They don't tell you how independence starts to feel different with age. They don't mention how your hands get tired opening a jar you used to twist off without thinking. How your back aches after standing just a little too long. How bending down to pick up a dropped spoon becomes a small battle. It's not dramatic. It doesn't make headlines. But when you live alone, these moments become daily tests of strength. Tests you face without applause, without anyone to hand you the cane you left in the other room, or to steady you when the hallway feels a little too long. They say you're strong, and you are. But strength isn't always about muscles or motion. It's about doing the hard things anyway. It's brushing your hair even when your arms don't want to lift. It's taking your medication even when your hands tremble. It's whispering, "Lord, give me strength," before you try to carry the laundry basket. And still, you show up. You keep going. That's a quiet kind of bravery most people will never see, but heaven sees it. So if you felt like your independence is slipping, if you've started to question whether slowing down makes you less, you need to hear this. It doesn't. You are not weaker because you need help. You are not less because you ask for assistance. That takes courage too. True strength is knowing when to say, "I can't do it all," and holding your head high anyway. The world glorifies self-reliance, but God honors humility. And he walks beside you in every quiet struggle, every silent victory. Even when no one else is there to cheer you on, he is. They say strength looks like standing tall, lifting heavy things, running fast, or leading loudly. But let me tell you a different story. Real strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes strength looks like waking up in the morning when everything in your body says stay in bed, but you swing your legs over the side anyway. It's making your own breakfast even when your hands feel slow. It's reaching for your pills, folding the laundry, brushing your teeth, and still whispering under your breath, "Thank you, Lord. I'm here." You see, we often think of endurance as something loud, something public. But sacred endurance is quiet. It's private. It's built in those small, everyday acts of faithfulness that no one sees. And here's something no one tells you: asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It takes courage to say, "I need a hand today." It takes even more courage to trust that God is still holding you, especially when your body feels like it's letting you down. Maybe you can't move as fast as you once did. Maybe your energy runs out sooner. But listen, none of that diminishes your value. In fact, that kind of quiet perseverance is a powerful testimony. You're still showing up, still choosing grace, still saying, "God, I trust you." Even when things are hard. That's sacred. That's strength most people overlook. The world praises hustle. God honors faithfulness. So if today feels slow, if your joints ache or your memory slips, if no one's watching but you keep going anyway, know this: heaven sees you. God sees you, and he doesn't measure your worth by how much you get done. He looks at your heart, at your persistence, at your steady, silent courage. This is what sacred endurance looks like. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's real, it's holy, and it matters more than you know. So keep whispering that quiet prayer. Keep taking that next step, because every act of endurance, even the smallest ones, echoes louder in heaven than you can imagine. Loneliness doesn't show up like a thunderstorm. It doesn't crash through the front door with noise and warning. No, it slips in slowly, almost gently, like a shadow creeping across the floor at sunset. At first, you barely notice it. You're used to the quiet, used to moving through the day at your own pace. But one morning, you sit down with your coffee, and something feels different. You look over at the extra chair across the table, and it seems more empty than usual. You glance at the calendar, and it's blank. Not a single plan, not even a reminder to call someone back. The silence that once felt peaceful now presses in, like a weight on your chest. It's not loud, but it's heavy, and it lingers. You pick up your phone, not to check the news or scroll social media, but to find a real connection. A voice, a conversation, someone to say, "How are you, really?" But the list of people to call feels shorter than it used to. And sometimes, even when you reach out, the silence answers back. That ache in your heart, it's real. And let me be clear, it's not weakness. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's simply part of being human. We were created for connection. We were never meant to do life entirely alone. And here's the thing most people don't talk about. You can be strong. You can be capable. You can be independent. And still, you can feel lonely. Maybe you haven't said it out loud. Maybe you've brushed it off as just a quiet season. But deep down, you know what it feels like to long for a voice, a touch, a shared laugh. You know what it feels like to want someone to just be there. And friend, that longing? It matters. God sees it. He hears the silent prayers, the unspoken sighs, the ache you carry in your chest that no one else notices. So the next time the silence creeps in, don't hide from it. Sit with it. Let it remind you that your heart is still open, still tender, still ready to love and be loved. You haven't shut down. You haven't given up. You're still reaching, and that too is a kind of strength. Let's talk about something we don't often say out loud, the quiet grief of fading relationships. Not every loss comes from an argument. Not every goodbye is spoken. Sometimes people just drift away. Friends who once called every week now only show up in old photos. Family gets busy. Texts go unanswered. The phone rings less and less. And no one really tells you how to handle that kind of grief. It sneaks up on you, not like a sudden heartbreak, but like a slow unraveling. One day, you realize it's been months since you've talked. Years, maybe, since you've really connected. And it hurts. It hurts in a way that's hard to explain because there's no big event to point to. Just time. Just distance. Just silence. You find yourself wondering, was it me? Did I say something? Did they forget? Or was I just easy to leave behind? But here's the truth, not everyone stays. And that doesn't mean you're unworthy. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. Life pulls people in different directions. Priorities shift. Schedules change. And sometimes people just grow apart. Not because of anger. Not because of betrayal. Just because life moves. Still, that ache? It's real. And it's valid. You are allowed to mourn relationships that simply faded. You are allowed to miss people who may not miss you back. And just because that kind of grief isn't loud or dramatic doesn't mean it doesn't matter. God sees that pain. The silent kind. The tears you wipe away before anyone notices. The birthdays that pass without a text. The holidays that feel a little emptier than they used to. And while the world might not stop for this kind of sorrow, he does. He pauses. He notices. He leans in. Because he's a God who cares about every corner of your heart, even the parts holding old friendships and fading memories. So if you're carrying that ache today, know this, you're not alone. You're not forgotten. And your heart still has room for new connection, new love, and yes, even healing. Keep showing up. Keep loving. Even when others fade away, God never does. Let's be honest, sometimes the hardest part about growing older isn't just the loneliness. It's the feeling that maybe you don't matter anymore. People often say, stay busy. They'll tell you to sign up for a group, volunteer, pick up a new hobby. And while those things are helpful, they don't always fill the space your heart is really aching to fill. Because what we're searching for isn't just activity, it's purpose. Busyness and purpose, they're not the same. You can have a packed schedule and still feel empty. What your soul is really longing for is something deeper. Something that says, I still have value. My life still has meaning. And here's the truth, it does. Purpose doesn't always come in grand gestures or public achievements. Sometimes purpose is found in quiet places, in the prayer you whisper for someone who never even knows you prayed. In the smile you give the neighbor who's struggling. In mentoring a younger person, not with a title, but with a listening ear and a kind word. In showing up with gentleness when the world is rushing by. Even rest can be purposeful. Taking care of your body. Honoring your limitations. Giving yourself grace for what you can no longer do and still choosing joy for what you can. You see, purpose isn't about productivity. It's about meaning. It's about knowing that your presence still carries weight, that your words still speak life, that your faith, your experience, your wisdom, it still matters. Have you ever noticed how a single phone call can change someone's day? How a short note of encouragement can stay with a person for weeks? You may think what you're doing is small, but God sees it as big. So if you're sitting in a quiet room wondering, do I still have something to give? The answer is yes. You do. You always will. Because as long as you have breath, you have purpose. And no amount of years can take that away. There's a certain fear that rarely makes it into everyday conversation. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in quietly, often in the middle of the night. You misplace your keys again. You forget a name again. And suddenly, a whisper turns into a question. Is this normal, or is this something more? Then your body joins in. The ache in your knees, the stiffness in your back, the tiredness that lingers longer than it used to. And while you might brush it off during the day, when the house is quiet, that fear grows louder, especially when you're walking through it alone. But here's the truth I want you to hear today, that fear does not come from God. Scripture says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. That means the anxiety whispering to you in the stillness? That's not his voice. Yes, aging comes with change. Yes, some things become harder, but that doesn't mean you're helpless. It doesn't mean you're forgotten. And it absolutely does not mean you're alone. God walks with you, not just in your strong years, but in every step of your slower ones. In every breath, every moment of confusion or concern, he is near. Even when no one is around to help you read the fine print, carry the groceries, or calm your thoughts at night, he is. And maybe you're thinking, but it's hard. I'm scared. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to face decline alone. That's honest. That's real. But remember, God doesn't ask you to face it alone. He invites you to lean on him, to trade fear for faith, to bring him every anxious thought and let his peace guard your heart and mind. So tonight, if you feel that familiar fear creeping in, pause, breathe, and whisper, God, be near, because he already is. You may be aging, but you're not abandoned. You may be slowing down, but you are still deeply loved. And that love? It's enough to carry you through anything. Maybe no one called today. Maybe the mailbox stayed empty. Maybe the phone sat silent, again. But just because the world forgets to check in doesn't mean you've been forgotten. You are not just a name tucked away in an old address book. You're not someone who used to matter. You matter right now to the one who created you, who sees you, who never stops loving you. God hasn't lost track of you. He's not too busy. He's not distracted. He knows your every thought, every sigh, every quiet act of courage. And heaven listens, really listens when you pray. Your voice may be soft, but your prayers shake the gates of heaven. Your life still carries purpose. It's not measured by how many people need you or how full your calendar is. It's measured by how closely you walk with God. By the love you still give. By the faith you still hold. By the hope you refuse to let go of. The world celebrates hustle, noise, constant motion, but God values stillness, faithfulness, presence, and in the quiet places of your life where no one else may be watching, God is. So don't let the silence fool you. Don't let the empty rooms or quiet days convince you that your story has ended. Because as long as you're still breathing, God is still writing. Your strength? It's not lost. It's just quieter now. But make no mistake, it still echoes. It still matters. And so do you.